Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about the relation between the USA and Mexico. The topics to be discussed are USA and Mexico border, migration, North American Free Trade Agreement, and educational and cultural exchanges.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the problem between Mexico and US. Um, the biggest problem that is the border because around the history these countries are fighting for delimit the border. In 1855 to 19, Texas is an ex-Mexican big immigrant south into what soon became in Mexico. And in 1917, U.S. farmers and manufacturers needs labor immigration of Mexicans into U.S. Is encouraged a current company executive Gride's President Woodrow Wilson. Personally, and Woodrow Wilson said that personally he believed that the Mexican laborers are the solution to the company because they need people for cheap hand labor. And in 1924, Mexico is exempt from the Immigration Act that restricts new corners from the other countries. And in 1929, after the Great Depression, thousands of Mexicans are unofficially repatriated by city states and federal government of the US sent back to Mexico. In 1965, in a major civil rights reform, U.S. President Johnson changed the preference of immigration law from country of origin. Therefore, European ethnicity to family ties inside the United States acknowledge and aid in large number of Mexicans with family members who are already resident and acknowledge the close relationships of the two countries. In 1969, President Nixon launched Operation Intercept and mandated surprise individual inspections of any and all borders crossing plane, car, or foot. Thousands of agents are dispatched from to Mexican border and virtually shutting down illegal immigration by car for the first time. Antonio Carrillo Flores, the Foreign Affairs Secretary of Mexican government, complains bitterly. In the 80s, in 1980, a brief fooling enforcement pedestrian and cars are stopped intermediately Ward Street. Editors smugglers and puppy across the border under a blanket in her car. Millions of Americans head south to vacation at Mexico beaches with, all, with only a driver lens. And this is the problem because all the people from US can can cross the border to go to vacations or touristics or for tourists, and the Mexican people cannot like the right to cross the border. In 1993 to 1994, um, President Bill Clinton mandated construction on a 13 miles border wall along the line in a stand between San Diego and Tijuana. It is projected to cost a lot of millions, maybe um, 40 millions, and reduce border oppression from 100 per day to 5,000 per day. For those 14 million immigrants find other paths. The North American the North America Free Trade Agreement, that is the NAFTA, pays large agricultural areas to devastate by low cost competition, whereas industrial agriculture a new surge of immigration heads northwards into the United States, swamping the border patrols. In 1996, President Clinton signs the Illegal Immigration Reform and Responsibility Act, increased fines for illegal entry and approving funding for more patrols and fence construction. Immigrants shift away from the traditional housing into privately held land, causing landowners of fenced their property. In, in 2000 and 2005, um, the Indians whose lands are split in half between the United States and Mexico are blamed by the idea that they need documents to move about their traditional lands. 34 years old, Tono Faustino Romero Cepeda, born in Mexico, is arrested and deported for doing business on tribal land in US, and he is banned from entering the country for 5 years. Then, sometimes later, planes crash into the Twin Towers on 1911. Border security became a national security issue, and President George Bush promoted increasing border patrols for 10,000 to 20,000 in 2008. Everyone knows shows international travel documents when crossing by car or airplane. The U.S. Border Patrol announced that 325 people died crossing the border from Mexico in 1 year. No more deaths is funded by religious leaders, including Catholic bishops, Chicanos, Presbyterians, ministers, and some leaders of local communities in Arizona and migrants. And in 2005, more than 1 million people are arrested crossing into the United States from Mexico, and more than 500 died crossing illegally. In 2006 to 2008, President Bush thinks that secure fence at promoting 700 million of fencing of the border plus a virtual wall across the interior 2,000 miles border. The Department of Homeland Security argues that it's impossible to construct the same type of fencing wall across the border divides the countries. In 2008, the US announced that a section of barrier had been mistakenly built for 6 feet, like 2 meters, inside the Mexican territory and must be moved. Congress approved the Department of Homeland Security right to circumvent more than 30 environmental laws in a push to get fencing constructed by year's end. To 2009 and 2011, the Great Recession, kings of the first outloan of Mexicans from the United States, since the annexion of Texas, creating a net loss of illegal living in the U.S. The U.S. speaks of 12 millions of illegal residents, and they say that is only from Mexican people. Um, in 20 in 2010, the New York Times wrote that over the previous 4 years, 21 unauthorized a tunnel running under the border walls that had been found in Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, and they are mainly for drug traffic and not immigration. to 2012, the Washington Office of Latin America and Human Rights organization warns that the number of border crossing fatalities have doubled since the year before. The United States Border Patrol find that the remains of 463 people died. Um, The Central and South America sends massive number of refugees into Mexico heading north. For the US, the number of non-Mexican crossing the border illegally exceeds the number of Mexican border the first time a search and unaccompanied children cross the US border. This is a very difficult problem because a lot of children died in the way to cross the border. Um, in 2016 and nowadays, actually in 2020, Pew Research report that more people from US are going to Mexico than the other way around. It's called Walker. Wisconsin government says that they are legitimate concern about security along the country. And finally, actually, as we know, President Donald Trump renews his vow to build a great wall across the rest of the 2,000 miles of the border. Executive orders call for an increase of 5,000 border patrol agents and 10,000 immigration and customs enforcement of ICE officers above the 20,000 already employed in the United States. Mothers and fathers are separated from their children and deported. This is the biggest problem nowadays because the United States Border Patrol separate the children of their parents, and now the children are in some institutions of the United States. They don't know anything about their parents. Let's continue with the other topic.
Well, now I'm going to talk about migration from Mexico to the United States. The definition of migration given by the RAE is geographical displacement of individuals or groups, generally for economic or social reasons. Some of the reasons why Mexicans migrate to the United States is because they still believe in the American dream. They leave their country and come to the United States looking for a better quality of life, quality of study for their children, and better job opportunities. But to get a better idea, I will return to some important historical aspects regarding the migration of Mexicans to the United States. Well, this begins in 1884 in Juarez City, which used to be called the Northern Past, where the Mexican Railroad arrives and an alliance is sealed between the supply of Mexican labor and the demand from the United States. That is where migration begins. 11 million Mexicans living in Mexico and 30 million Mexicans who live in the United States but who have Mexican roots. A contracting system was used where the passage and food were paid to the
migrant and he have to pay for these services with work. It was similar to slavery. In 1921, this system was broken with the deportations that occurred due to economic crisis. Rigid control systems were made, where not only were the borders closed for Mexico, but those who already reside there were reported. When the United States entered the Second World War, many workers left for the war, for which reason they began again to hire Mexican personnel in order to collect crops, repair the railroads. This was known as the Bracero program. Then the Bracero contracts are created that last about 22 years, where the migrants have the benefit that they go legally and with some protection from the state. This is one of those Bracero contracts. Then it ends in 1964, where the issue of the undocumented is presented. This is because the United States no longer wants to carry out the Bracero contracts, but rather controls the border according to the economic needs of the country. In 1984, the first amnesty law regularized the situation with an immigration reform, where Mexicans receive their papers and stay to live in the United States. After 5 years, they can naturalize and can take their family to live there. In 1993, border controls and persecution began until 2007, where this ends. Immigration from Mexico to the United States has been decreasing after this year. On the other hand, documented migration by some professionals has increased. Finally, we find people like Donald Trump, who oppose the migration of Mexicans and put strong restrictions on crossing the border, in addition to implementing a xenophobic discourse with which a large part of the population of the United States agree. And this is all for the migration from Mexico to the United States.
Now I'm going to talk about the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. This agreement was signed in 1992 by Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and took effect on January 1st of 1994. Proponents argue that establishing a free trade area in North America would bring prosperity through increased trade and production, resulting in the creation of millions of well-paying jobs in all participating countries. NAFTA fundamentally reshaped North American economic relations, driving unprecedented integration between the developed economies of Canada and the United States and Mexico's developing one. In the United States, NAFTA originally enjoyed bipartisan backing. It was negotiated by Republican President George W. Bush, passed by a Democratic-controlled Congress and was implemented under Democratic President Bill Clinton. Regional trade tripled under the agreement, and cross-border investment among the three countries also grew significantly. However, NAFTA was a perennial target in the broader debate over free trade. President Donald Trump says it undermined United States jobs and manufacturing, and in December 2019, his administration completed an updated version of the pact with Canada and Mexico, now known as the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. The USMCA won broad bipartisan support on Capitol Hill and entered into force on July the 1st of 2020. Economists largely agree that NAFTA benefited North America's economies. Regional trade increased sharply over the treaty's first 2 decades, from roughly 290 billion in 1993 to more than 1.1 trillion in 2016. Cross-border investment also surged with United States foreign direct investment stock in Mexico increasing in that period from 15 billion to more than 100 billion. But experts also say that it has proven difficult to tease out the deal's direct effects from other factors, including rapid technological change and expanded trade with countries such as China. Meanwhile, debate persists regarding NAFTA's effect on employment and wages. Some workers and industries face painful disruptions as they lost market share due to increased competition, while others gain from the new market opportunities that were created. How did NAFTA affect the US economy? In the years since NAFTA, trade between the United States and its North American neighbors more than tripled, growing more rapidly than US trade with the rest of the world. Canada and Mexico are the two largest destinations for US exports, accounting for more than one-third of the total. Most estimators conclude that the deal increased United States gross domestic product by less than 0.5%, an addition of up to 80 billion to the US economy upon full implementation, or several billion dollars of aided growth per year. Such upsides of trade often escape notice because although the costs are highly concentrated in specific industries such as auto manufacturing, the benefits of a deal such as NAFTA are distributed widely across society. NAFTA supporters estimate that some 14 million US jobs rely on trade with Canada or Mexico, and that the nearly 200,000 exporter-related jobs created annually by the pact pay 15 to 20% more on average than the jobs that were lost. On the other hand, critics of the deal argue that it was to blame for job losses and wage stagnation in the United States, driven by low wage competition, companies moving production to Mexico to lower cost, and a widening trade deficit. The Center for Economic and Policy Research's CEPR, Dan Baker, and the Economic Policy Institute's Robert Scott argued that the surge of imports after NAFTA caused a loss of up to 600,000 United States jobs over 2 decades, though they admit that some of its important growth would likely have happened even without NAFTA. Many workers and labor leaders blame trade agreements such as NAFTA for the decline in United States manufacturing jobs. The United States auto sector lost some 350,000 jobs since 1994, a third of the industry, while Mexican auto sector employment spiked from 120,000 to 550,000 workers. But other economists, including Gary Clyde and Kathleen Simino Isaacs of the Peterson Institute for International Economics, have emphasized that increased trade produces overall gains for the United States economy. Some jobs are lost due to imports, but others are created, and consumers benefit significantly from falling prices and often improved quality of goods. Their 2014 PIIE study of NAFTA's effects found a net loss of about 15,000 jobs per year due to the pact, but gains of roughly $450,000 for each job lost, in the form of higher productivity and lower consumer prices. Additionally, many economists assert that the recent troubles of United States manufacturing have little to do with NAFTA, arguing that domestic manufacturing was under stress decades before the treaty. Research by David Dorn and Gordon Hanson, published in 2016, found that competition with China has had a much bigger negative impact on United States jobs since 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization or WTO. Hanson, an economist and trade expert at the University of California, San Diego, says that the steepest decline in manufacturing jobs, 17 million to 11 million between 2000 and 2010, is mostly attributable to trade with China and underlying technological changes. China is at the top of the list in terms of the employment impact that we found since 2000, with technology second and NAFTA far less important, he says. In fact, NAFTA helped the United States auto sector compete with China, says Hansen, by contributing to the development of cross-border supply chains. NAFTA lowered costs, increased productivity, and improved United States competitiveness. This meant shedding some jobs in the United States as positions moved to Mexico, he says, but without the pact, even more could have been lost. Because Mexico is so close, you can have a regional industry cluster where goods can go back and forth. The manufacturing industries in the three countries can be very integrated, Hansel says. These linkages, which have given United States automakers an advantage over China, would be much more difficult to achieve without NAFTA's tariff reductions and protections for intellectual property. How did it affect the Mexican economy? NAFTA boosted Mexican farm exports to the United States, which have tripled since the pact's implementation. Hundreds of thousands of auto manufacturing jobs have also been created in the country, and most studies have found that the agreement increased productivity and lowered consumer prices in Mexico. The pact catalyzed Mexico's transition from one of the world's most protectionist economies to one of the most open to trade. Mexico has reduced many of its trade barriers upon joining the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT, the precursor to the WTO, in 1986, but still had a pre-NAFTA average tariff level of 10%. Mexican policymakers saw NAFTA as an opportunity to both accelerate and lock in these hard-won reforms of the Mexican economy. In addition to liberalizing trade, Mexico's leaders reduced public debt, introduced a balanced budget rule, stabilized inflation, and built up the country's foreign reserves. So, although Mexico was hard hit by the 2008 financial crisis due to its dependence on exports to the United States market, the next year Mexican exports to the United States fell 17% and its economy contracted by over 6%. Its economy bounced back relatively quickly, returning to growth in 2010. But Mexico's NAFTA experience suffered from disparities between the promises of some of its supporters that the pact would deliver rapid growth, raise wages, and reduce immigration, and the deal's outcomes. Between 1993 and 2013, a period when Latin America was undergoing a major economic expansion, Mexico's economy grew at an average rate of just 1.3% yearly. Poverty remains at the same levels as in 1994, and the expected convergence of United States and Mexican wages didn't happen, with Mexico's per capita income rising at an average of just 1.2% annually in that period, far slower than Latin American countries such as Brazil, Chile, and Peru. Unemployment also rose, which some economists have blamed of NAFTA for exposing Mexican farmers, especially corn producers, to competition from heavily subsidized United States agriculture. A study led by CIPR economist Mark Weisbrot estimated that NAFTA put almost 2 million small-scale Mexican farmers out of work, in turn driving illegal migration to the United States. Many analysts explain these divergent outcomes by pointing to the two-speed nature of Mexico's economy, in which NAFTA drove the growth of foreign investment, high-tech manufacturing, and rising wage in the industrial north, while the largely agrarian south remained detached for this new economy. Ultimately, many experts say Mexico's recent economic performance has been affected by non NAFTA factors. The 1994 devaluation of the peso drove Mexican exports, while competition with China's low cost manufacturing sector likely depressed growth. Unrelated public policies such as land reform made it easier for farmers to sell their land and emigrate. UCSD's Hanson has argued that Mexico's struggles have largely domestic causes: poorly developed credit markets, a large and low productivity informal sector, and dysfunctional regulation. During the 2016 presidential campaign, both Trump and Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent, criticized NAFTA for bringing United States job losses. After entering office, Trump opened renegotiations to get a better deal for the United States. Trade remains a hot button issue, with candidates in the 2020 race divided over whether to support the USMCA. Much of the debate among policy experts has centered on how to mitigate the negative effects of deals such as NAFTA, including whether to compensate workers who lose their jobs or provide retraining programs to help them transition to new industries. Experts say programs such as the United States Trade Adjustment Assistance, which helps workers pay for education or training to find new jobs, could help quell anger directed at trade liberalization. Many common economists argue that current TAA funding levels are far from sufficient to address the increase in trade-related job losses. Issuing these policy proposals, Trump instead made good on his campaign promise to renegotiate NAFTA. He used tariffs as bargaining leverage throughout the process, applying important tariffs on steel and aluminum in early 2018 and threatening to do the same with automobiles. Trump's demands included more access to Canada's highly protected dairy market, better labor protections, dispute resolution reform, and new rules for digital commerce. In late 2019, the Trump administration won support from congressional Democrats for the USMCA after agreeing to incorporate stronger labor enforcement. In the updated pact, the parties settled on a number of changes. Rules of origin for the auto industry were tightened, require 75% of each vehicle to originate in the member countries, up from 62.5%, and new labor stipulations were added, requiring 40% of each vehicle to come from factories paying at least $16 per hour. A proposed expansion of intellectual property protections for United States pharmaceuticals, long a red line for United States trade negotiators, was sacrificed. The USMCA also significantly scales back the controversial invasor state dispute settlement mechanism, eliminating it entirely with Canada and limiting it to certain sectors with Mexico, including oil and gas and telecommunications. In early 2020, the United States Congress approved the USMCA with large bipartisan majorities in both chambers, and the deal entered into force on July 1st. Yet some critics have complained that the new rules of origin and minimum wage requirements are onerous and amount to government-managed trade. CFR's Alden was more sanguine, saying the administration can take credit for restoring bipartisanship to United States trade policy. He warns, however, that if this new hybrid of Trumpian nationalism and democratic progressism is what it now takes to do trade deals with the United States, there may be very few takers.
The USA has a strong series of educational and cultural programs with Mexico. These programs work with young leaders, students, civil society, and entrepreneurs. They provide English language learning, promote STEM education, strengthen civil society, provide exchange opportunities, and expand economic opportunities. The Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation, the leadership programs of the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs as Young People in Action, the Young Leaders of the American Initiative, the United States Institute's study, which focuses on indigenous and Afro-American population, and English language programs such as the Access Program and Scholars and English Language Specialists. Also exists the Mexico-United States Bilateral Forum on Higher Education, Innovation and Research that expands opportunities for educational exchanges, scientific research, partnerships, and cross-border innovation. Um, the bilateral forum complements the goals of the 100,000 strong in the Americas Innovation Fund, the department's signature Hemispheric Education Initiative, and the 100,000 Innovation Fund is the reliable and flexible public and private sector mechanism between the department, U.S. embassies, non-governmental organizations, companies, foundations, and higher education institutions that stimulates and supports higher education institutions partnerships to create new models of short-term academic exchange and training opportunities for student teams in the United States and the rest of the Western Hemisphere, including Mexico. After 6 years, Mexico is the leading country in this hemispheric initiative to partner with U.S. universities, college, and community college. Today, a total of 60 teams have been awarded grants from the Innovation Fund among higher education institutes from both countries are working in 9 Mexican states and 24 U.S. states to provide academic training to underserved students to gain technical skills and prepare for the workforce in areas such as public health, STEM, sustainable agriculture, technology, business development, education, and others. Leading private sector partners that have contributed to Mexico's 100,000 Innovation Fund include Banorte, Gruma, Coca-Cola, Televisa, and the Jenkins Foundation. The Fulbright program, started in Mexico in 1948, is one of the largest in the world. The United States-Mexico Binational Fulbright Program, or Fulbright Garcia Robles, is one of the largest in the world, sends around 100 beneficiaries in each direction and receives approximately 5 million annually in contributions from the governments of the United States and Mexico. Since the establishment of the Binational Fulbright Commission in 1990, with joint funding from the United States and Mexico, more than 3,500 students on both sides of the border have received Fulbright Garcia Robles scholarships. Fulbright graduates have risen to prominent positions in Mexican business, academia, culture, and politics. To finish, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Mexico-United States Treaty on the Recovery and Return of Stolen archaeological, historical, and cultural assets. This was the first international treaty related to the trafficking of cultural property. Predatory to the 1970 UNESCO Convention on Measures to Prohibit and Prevent the Illicit Import, Export, and Transfer of Property of Cultural Property. This treaty demonstrates the leadership of both countries on this issue.